So today we are going to be discussing JavaScript conditional statements. And when we talk about conditions, we talk about if-else. So the syntax of writing an if statement is you start with the keyword if, followed by the parentheses. Then you write your condition in here, mostly a comparison code. Then you follow by the code block. Your code block will contain the code to be executed if condition is true. So this is mostly the syntax of if statements. All right. Now, this is the syntax of if-else. If-else is the same with your if condition followed by code block. Then after your code block, you can put your else followed by another code block. So which means code to execute if condition is true and code to execute if condition is false. This is the syntax of if-else. Now, let's put it into practice. Let's say we have a variable a equals to 10. Now, we want to check for a condition. We can say if a is equals to 10, we want to run a console log. A is 10. So you see here is the condition that we want to check. And this condition, a simple comparison. You can see the comparison operator. We are checking if a is equal to 10. Remember, not this equal. This is an assignment. This is a comparison. And a comparison will return you a Boolean result, either true or false. So because our a is 10, and we are checking that if a is 10, right? So that means this code is going to execute. Sorry. Let's assume that we change a for some reason, a becomes 9. Now, if you run this code, you will see that nothing executes because this code block will not execute because the condition is not true. So your if will only execute the code block if the comparison that you pass here is true. Now, you can also use multiple change comparison. Let's say we have another variable b. You can also say if a equals to 10 and b greater than 0. We want to console log. Now, this your console log can be a very complicated, it can also be a very complicated logic and JavaScript statements. So this is just a test, right? So you can substitute this to anything of your choice. So we're logging here that A and B comparison is true. So if we run this code, you will get nothing. You know why? Because only this one is true, but this one is not true because A is not 10. So if we change this to 10, which means both will be true, then you will get this one will execute, this one also executes. If you change this one to something like -5, because -5 is not greater than 0, only this one will execute, but this one will not. You see? So that is how to use a conditional statement. We can also use the OR operator. So if you use OR, it means either this one is true or this one is true, it will still execute the code block. Remember when we thought about this chain comparison using AND or OR? So if we run this code, you see that this did not execute, but this one executed because it said A or B comparison is true. But A and B did not print because both are not true. So if we change this back to 5, which will means that every of the conditions are true, then it will execute the 3 code block. Any question?
No question for now.
All right. So that is for if. Now let's deal with if else. So we can say if, since you already understand if, now the else is simply an optional code block that should be executed if the condition is false. So A is 10 here. If it is true, else we want to log A is not 10. So from our variable here, the value is 10. Who can tell me what this will print if we run it?
A is 10.
A is 10.
Yes, so it's going to print A is 10. What if we change this to another number? What will now be?
S will execute. A is not 10.
Exactly. So X will be executed because A is no longer 10. So this is the use of if else. So you can either use only if you just want to run a code based on a condition. You can use if else if you need an alternative. If the condition is not true, you need an alternative to be executed. So you use else. All right. Any question on this?
No, I don't have.
All right. So also note that in your if else, you can also use chained comparison. And not just 2 comparison, you can chain as much as possible that you want to check. Okay. So now you can also use if else, if else, and else. So in this case, there are sometimes you want to check for multiple conditions. Based on a condition, you want to execute a particular code. Based on a condition, you want to execute a particular code. Then if all the conditions fail, you also need another code that you want to execute. So let's say, for example, we want to compare these two variables, A and B. So we want to say if A is equals to 10, we want to print to the console, A is 10. And you can also, sorry, this is else if. So you can also do else if. Now remember, this is not just else. He's saying else if B is greater than 0. Another code block. We want to log B is greater than 0. You can also continue to chain the else if as many times as how many conditions you want to check. If A is greater than B, we want to console.log A is greater than B. Else if B is greater than A, you see how many conditions we are chaining down there. Doesn't matter how many times you chain else if, is going to respond. B is greater than A. You can decide to end it with an else. It's possible you leave it like this if you don't want an else. If you only care about these conditions, these 4 conditions, you can leave the else. But if these 4 conditions fails, nothing will be executed. So if you want something to be executed, if these 4 conditions fail, then you put else. And you say console.log no condition passed. So now I want you to take note here. JavaScript will read this from top to bottom. So even though that this condition is true, if any of the condition above is true, it's only going to execute that one and forget the rest when you are using else if. So based on our variable now, this is 9, this is 5, is going to first of all check, is A equals to 10? Since our A is not 10, it's going to skip this one, this code block. It will come down to this second one and check, else if is A greater than, is B greater than 0, it will check the variable. Our variable is 5, which means it's greater than 0. So it's going to print this one and it will ignore the rest of the code and move on. Even though our A is greater than B, which means this condition is also true, is not going to execute this one because this one is already true. So if you run this code, you see that it only executes B is greater than 0, which is this one, and it did not execute this one. So if we make this one to become, let's leave it as is and change the variable here. So if we make this one negative, which means this one is no longer true, this one is not true, this one is not true, so it's going to check this one. So is A greater than B? 9 is greater than -5. Of course, it's going to execute this one and ignore this one and ignore this one. So if you run this, you're going to get A is greater than B. And this one is ignored, these are all ignored. Do you understand the flow?
Yes, for me.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so now sometimes using if, else if, else if, else if can get really long. It can get really long, and we need, JavaScript provides us with an alternative, and that alternative is switch. It's called switch case. Switch case is just another syntax that you can use that also operates like as if. So if the syntax for switch case is you start with the keyword switch, followed by the parentheses, where you put in the, now pay attention to this, you put in the expression that you want to check, not a condition. This is different. This is something that you need to pay attention. Then followed by the code block. Now, this is where you check for your condition using the case. So you want to say case condition 1, execute this code, execute this block. Then break. So this is the syntax. Case condition 2, execute this block, then break. Then default. Default is like the else. Execute this block. All right. You see, we have 3 keywords here: switch, case, and break with default. That is 4. So your switch takes in the expression. Expression could be the name of the variable. For in this case, we want to switch A, right? So you put in the expression here, then you check for the condition. You say case, this expression meets this condition, run this code, and break means don't go further. Break will interrupt the execution here, and it won't run the rest. If this condition is not met, it's going to run this condition, the second condition, the second case. And just like else if, that is how our case is. You can put in multiple case here. You can write as many cases as you need for your program here. And this default is also not compulsory, but if you want, if all the conditions are not met, it's going to run the default. That's the work of default. So let's put this into practice, and we see what is going on there. So let's assume that we have our variable again, A. We want to check. So you switch. This is the syntax. So we switch A. So we want to compare A based on several conditions. So when you are using case checks against this value that you pass here. So if we say case 10, this is equivalent as saying if A equals to 10. So if you say case 10, which means if A equals to 10, we want to console log A is 10. Then break. Always remember to break, because that is what terminates the code. If not, it's going to run the next and the next and the next. And that might not be the what you need. Unless that's what you need, then you can leave out the break. So if you leave out the break, it's going to compare this. If it's true, it's going to run this. And it's also going to compare this. Without the break, it's going to run this one also. So case 9, console.log A is 9. Case 8, console.log A is 8. Now we can continue doing case as much as we want. When you are done, you put in the default as the last. Remember the breaks. When every other thing fails, the default will execute. A is less than A is some other numbers. All right. So you see this, your default is where is like your else in this particular example. So if we run this code, because our A is 9, it's simply going to print A is 9. And if we change this one to 8, it's going to print A is 8. And if we choose 10, it's going to print A is 10. If we choose something smaller that we didn't check for, it's going to print A is some other numbers. That is about switch case. You use switch very good when you are comparing one variable, mostly. But based on, and again, switch is also good when you have so many conditions you want to check for that one variable. You know, here we changed a lot of else if, else if, else if. You can also use this, is a simpler syntax without all the code block and the rest. It's a simpler syntax that you can use if you are just switching. You know, here we are not mentioning A equals to 10, A equals to 9, A equals to, you know, we are not doing all that. But of course, you can do them if you want, right? You can do this. You can do this, of course. You see? But what this will do is it's going to say case true, because this is remember, this is a comparison. And this is going to return Boolean for us. So if your A is a number, remember that whatever that is here is using it to check against your A as a value, as the value of A. So if you do something like this, you might not get the exact response that you are looking for, right? Because this is going to return true as a value. So if your A is not true, or the value is not being true, this will not give you the expected response. So you see here, you get A is some other number. So let's assume that we change this to 9, for example. Now you see, it still prints A is some other number because these are not returning the actual value of our A. Remember, your case is comparing whatever you have here with your A. And that is why we don't do much of this in here. Unless your A is going to be a Boolean that returns true or false, then you can do something like this. You can even do and inside here. So if we do something like case 10 and B greater than 0, you can do something like this. So imagine we make this 10. You see, it still gives you, even though this is true, right? And this is also greater than 0, but no, this is not greater than 0. Yeah, greater
But
than
you did
0.
not pass. You did not pass the B inside the expression.
Of course, because our B is global, is here. So we can mention it. It's not what you pass here that you can mention here.
Okay.
Provided that the variable is in the scope where this switch can see it, you can pass it directly here. So this your A is not really visible here. It's because of the global. When we say A equals to this, it's referencing this global one. So what your switch passes this is the value, is checking the value to your case. The value is what is checking. So when we say case 10, and this is greater than this, you see, it still gives you some other number. Because why? Because this total expression is returning a Boolean, which is true or false. And that is why you shouldn't do this unless that is what you are looking for. So for example, if our variable is a Boolean, for example, now we want to check the one that will give us a Boolean result. So if we say case B greater than this, case, of course, all this one will always return false. So let's just use this one to check, for example. Because our A is true, anything that returns true here will be executed, right? So you see here, A is 10. You see, with the comparison operation, A is 10. And these ones are false, it will never execute this. And if this one is also false, if it's also false, it's going to execute the default. So this condition is correct, but the result is not correct. Because these two things is going to return you a Boolean, which is true or false. And remember, your case is comparing your, whatever expression you pass here is comparing the value with the value or the outcome of this your value you put here. That is this expression. So in other words, it's going to compare this expression, and this expression is going to be true. So just imagine you saying something like case true here. So, and the value of A is not true because it is a number. So your expression evaluates to true at the end. And your switch case always switches value, is the value that it cares about. What is the value? It's going to compare the value of this with the value of this. And if it is true, then before it will execute this block. So you're only checking, you are comparing values.